whether you're looking at being a homeowner or whether you're looking at being a tenant, there's an affordability crunch that's coming. Because there's not an increase in supply. There's going to be an increase in demand with population coming in. And then there are obviously price pressures as far as, the cost of borrowing, the cost of construction, the difficulty of getting permits, that kind of stuff. But that's not doing anything to dampen demand.
No.
And so all
to
that
help affordability.
Exactly.
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec. And today, I am very lucky to be joined by my friend Terrie. How's it going, Terrie?
Good, Axel. Thank you for having me on your show again.
Yeah, well, it's been a while, and we were just in the office having an interesting conversation. Just thought we should record and we should share it. And before we go right back into it, I just want to remind everyone, thank you for your continued support. Share this episode with a friend who you think could benefit from this conversation, because our goal is to reach as many people as possible and help them get the confidence to invest in real estate. So, we were just talking last week. There was an article that came out in La Presse about a CMHC report predicting that over the next 3 years in the Montreal regions, rents were going to go up to increase by about 30%. So obviously there's a lot of different segments, a lot of different markets and all that. But we started to talk about it. So Terrie, is that something that you could see happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, anecdotally, in terms of my rental business and what I see happening here, that is definitely underway. I mean, we had in the pandemic, there was a bit of a slowdown because of population freeze, really. Like we had a lot of foreign students and just lack of immigration. Mm-hmm. And now the Canadian government has turned on the spigots again. Quebec reluctantly is trying to say, no, not so many, but there's only so much they can do given that, Canada let in 1 million new immigrants in 2022, and they're looking at doing 500,000 a year for the foreseeable future. And just to give you a bit of a Quebec context for that. So I looked up the statistics starting back in the early 2000s. And historically, Quebec has let in somewhere around 50,000 immigrants a year through the 2000s. And that last year, that number was closer to 70,000. And that's what we're looking at kind of for the foreseeable future. And also, when you put that in context of different markets, obviously, more of those people are going to be settling in Montreal than anywhere else. And so to me, I already see that pressure on the rental market. And I already see different demographic of people who are coming in with this wave of immigration. I'm definitely seeing more immigrants who are applying for units, for example, in Lachine or in places where,
lower rents.
Lower-ish rents.
Yeah.
But that those, when there are vacant units in those areas, that it's already definitely, it's gone up 20% already. Yeah. So as to what's going to happen in the next X number of years, 30% seems entirely realistic.
Yeah. And so, combined with that, as you said, immigration has been a huge one. So we have more and more people coming into the country, into the province, and yet we're not adding as many new units on the market. So there's been a steep drop in new construction starts, les mises en chantier in French. And so for a number of reasons. So obviously, the price of money, interest rates has been higher. So it's more difficult to make projects work. The cost of labor, the cost of materials, and it's not getting any easier with the cities. I've been working on a project. We're 8 months in for a building permit. We're pretty much there, but not entirely. So, and then we did another one where it took 9 months to get a renovation permit to renovate a fully vacant 4-unit. It should have taken 2 or 3 months. So dealing with the cities and administration is getting harder and harder. And then the cost of projects is getting higher and higher. So it's discouraging a lot of people from starting new projects. Therefore, the supply of new dwelling has been falling. And in the article from La Presse last week, there's interesting statistics saying that the CMHC had made a prediction that they were forecasting about 18,000 new unit builds for 2023 in the Montreal region. Now, at an annualized rate, because we only have 1/3 of the year that's gone through, and we may get surprises later, we were more around the 12,000 mark. Now, in order to meet really the demand that we would need, they were saying that we would need to do twice what we did during the good years up until like 2020, 2021, and that was about 25,000 a year. So we would need to do about 50,000 new units per year in Quebec to meet demand, to stabilize rents. Yet, for example, this year, we're only doing about 12,000, so a quarter of what we need. So just imagine the pressure that it's putting as more people are coming in and we're not building nearly as much as we should just to keep up. I'm not even saying increase the overall portfolio, just to keep up with demand. So naturally the pressure ends up on rates on the increasing side.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is I was reading an article not long ago talking about housing affordability. And people are kind of thinking, oh, we have this decrease in prices, the house prices are going to go down a little bit. We had a dip, the cost of borrowing, but like, whether you're looking at being a homeowner or whether you're looking at being a tenant, there's an affordability crunch that's coming. Because there's not an increase in supply. There's going to be an increase in demand with population coming in. And then there are obviously price pressures as far as, the cost of borrowing, the cost of construction, the difficulty of getting permits, that kind of stuff. But that's not doing anything to dampen demand.
No.
And so all
to
that
help affordability.
Exactly. So that basically, like, you're looking at one side of the supply and demand curve, where there's a bottleneck on the supply side and the demand is going up. Well, that's inevitably going to end up in price increases, at least on the rental side afterwards. As far as house prices, residential house prices go, they're talking about not necessarily an increase in prices, but a decrease in affordability.
Yeah. And actually, you bring up a very good point. Like, to add new units that are considered affordable, it's obviously units of a certain size that have a lower rent. Now, would it be fair to say that those are kind of the last ones to be addressed, because developers at the beginning need to build units that will pay for the project? So that's full price units. So in a way, it's kind of like the snake chasing its tail, in that in order to add more affordable units, we would first need to fill the demand for normal units, which is kind of counterintuitive, because in an economic cycle, when the rents are increasing higher, there's more people looking for lower priced units. So I'd love to talk to an expert and an economist on that, on like, what's the plan to really address this? Because we're in the middle of a crunch, and it's going to keep going.
I don't think there is a plan. Well, I think the plan that there is the MLI Select CMHC. I think that's the plan.
Yeah,
that's the plan.
That's part of the solution.
They're not looking at necessarily constructing a whole bunch of more affordable units. They're looking at keeping units that are in the affordable range and giving owners an incentive beyond the TAL to keep things that way.
Yeah. And at the same time, in speaking to other investors and developers, it seems like out of the three levers that can be used for the MLI, so affordability, accessibility, and environmental, the affordability is always kind of the last one chosen, because it puts a cap on your rents. So yeah, it's a good product, and it may be a good incentive, but yet it's the affordability part is kind of, I wouldn't say left behind, but maybe it hasn't had the desired effect like the CMHC was hoping it would.
No, and especially not if you look at, again, anecdotally, I look at, let's say, the price of a 4.5 in Montreal. So when I was looking at the criteria for MLI, whatever, a year ago, last rental season, I'm like, okay, so it's like 1,080, like, some of my cheaper units, like maybe I can flirt with that number and it's not going to be prohibitive. Now, those units in July of this year are worth $1,300.
Easy.
Am I eager to peg my rents at below market value to access good financing? Maybe if I could, sacrifice some future increases, I might be willing to do it, but I'm certainly not going to take a hit today on rental values for that. So
yeah, no, that's a really good point. And so also what would be interesting to know is at what rate or when is the CMHC also maybe going to increase those numbers and those thresholds? Because if they stay like that for too many years, then it's really going to remove the incentive from anyone to try to stick to it.
I mean, my understanding is that it's pegged to 33% of income, because that's the
Yes.
statistic for affordability. So
Yeah.
again, like I'm not in the data of what Montreal income is like, but I would be surprised if the income of the average Montreal household goes up by 30% in order to increase the ceiling of affordable
Yeah.
of the affordable housing barometer. And I mean, I'm actually curious to see what governments are going to do about this, because I mean, this is a problem. Like, we're looking here, like there's a car crash that's in the process of happening. We're letting in this many immigrants because our labor markets need it, because it's the right thing for the Canadian economy and ecosystem. But housing is like a major bottleneck on the integration of those people, and also on, when you look at things that end up creating tension socially, if there's all of a sudden all this increased competition for housing, I can see that headed in a not very nice direction if people start looking for scapegoats as to why all of a sudden everything is so unaffordable.
Yeah,
so.
and in the long term could cause more social unrest. Yeah, no, it's a real problem we're getting into. As I was gonna say, I have a bias, obviously, from what I do, but to me, one of the big impediments is actually the administration of cities and the way it's run and how long it takes to be able to present a project and get a building permit. And just if that, I don't want to say that procedure should be easier. We need standards for building. We need standards for facades. We need standards for all that. I completely agree. It's just that it takes too long. Like, is it normal that it takes a year to get a building permit? I don't think so, especially in a moment where we say that we have a housing crunch. Then help us. Like, I don't see the city adding new units. It's developers, it's investors. Seriously.
No, I'm just Valerie, if you're listening.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Call you out.
Call you out, please.
On Axel's show, it's safer that way.
help us help more people. A lot of investors have realized that they have a part to play, and I think we want to play it. We just don't always really know how, because of how discouraging it can be, because of how long it takes. So yeah, Valérie, if you're listening to this and you have an idea, we're open. On this note, Terrie, is there anything else that
that I want to add?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if by way of kind of book ending the conversation, right? Like, we started with an off-camera discussion of, some of the pessimism that we have been feeling for the past year. And, asking ourselves, how are we reading the tea leaves? Is it a good time to invest? The market is far from hot. The cost of borrowing is still high, but I think I am in the mood to conclude this with cautious optimism as far as where things are going, because if you look at the pressures on the rental market, like, there is only one way that train is going to go. It's not going to start backing up. And, even the government is such a slow moving creature that if they start doing something now in order to ease that pressure, we're not going to see the effects of it for the next 4 or 5 years. And so if you're looking for a read of what's going to happen in the rental market in Montreal and in some of the other urban areas in Quebec, there's not going to be an easing pressure on the rental market in the next little while. And for investors, that's only going to drive rents in one direction.
Yeah, an increase. And then right before we started, we're both talking about this month of July. Roughly how many moves do you have? Because that's a really interesting indication of occupancy rates and on turnover.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, obviously it's in the realm of the anecdotal, because certain properties are more stable than others. But, if I can say, I think in the past few years, maybe we were doing, 15% turnover. This year it's 5%.
Yeah.
And so, like, I mean, I think even some tenants, as we were going through the renewal season, they're saying like, oh, Terrie, I'm thinking of moving. And then they ended up, then it just didn't happen. And I know that there's not people who are necessarily extremely happy where they are, but I think it's that once they go out there and start seeing what the prices are like and what the market's like, they're like, oh gosh, I actually have a better deal than I thought I did, and I better hang on to it.
Yeah. And I've actually heard that quite a few times of like, no, I'm planning to move this year. And then after 2 months of looking and seeing what's on the market, it's like, wow, I could not find something that I have right now for the same price, or even just a little bit more. It's significantly higher. So those who are willing to leave and not having found something yet, I think are going to be in for a tough realization.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, so my take on this is I'm still optimistic. Be careful, research your market, make some offers. But as Terrie said, like, rents are still on the increase. It's just that you have to make a good purchase, because you make money when you buy. there we go. Hopefully that was helpful. Share it with a friend who you think could benefit from this conversation, and stay tuned as we will have more next week. Terrie, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Axel.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.